Good afternoon, everyone. As I see the participant list is still climbing, I might give another 30 seconds as folks are coming in, but do welcome all of you who are in today and really exciting webinar and a conversation around housing in America's energy communities. As you might guess, it's one of the hot topics for energy communities, and we're excited to have this conversation today. And so with that, I do thank everyone for joining us today. Today, it's really about highlighting community and federal efforts to try to address housing challenges. And it will feature some examples of some innovative partnerships and investments that have led to a successful housing development in energy communities. But before I do pass it along to the really good content and our first speaker, I want to give a quick context on the energy communities. If this is the first time you've joined us, we are a collaboration of 11 federal agencies across the federal government, specifically attempting to streamline the federal government processes, create government efficiencies, and to deliver resources directly to energy communities so that energy communities that have foreseen or have experienced a coal plant closure, coal mine closure, or see ones that are coming down into the future have the resources necessary for a vibrant economy, and that includes everything across the economy and certainly housing. It means that we want to try to eliminate obstacles like cost share requirements. We want to tailor investments directly to meet the needs of energy communities, like affordable housing, increasing workforce opportunities, training programs that meet industry demand, and increasing local capacity and really lifting up local leaders and plans and the ideas of local solutions by catalyzing federal investments. And so we're really about community-driven economic development initiatives. Definitely not we're from the government and we're from, the old adage of we're from the government, we're here to help. We want to make it the new adage of we're from the government, we're here to help. And what it means is to enable communities to lift up community-driven economic development initiatives. And so our efforts are all completely aligned and set by the priorities of workers and stakeholders in communities, and this is including making sure that we're ensuring communities are equipped with all of the tools across the federal government, but also building partnerships at the state level and the local level so that we're all working together and all rowing the boat together. And so we spent the last 4 years really listening and learning from workers and communities. You see 13,000 direct engagement with stakeholders. We have a navigator program that I'll quickly plug. If you send an email to our navigator program, you can find it at our website, energycommunities.gov. We will respond. It is the open door or the no wrong door to the federal government opportunity that we've put in place. And through that listening, we had a request for information asking for where the greatest needs are across communities. And as you see, 55% of energy communities have responded affordable housing as a priority for federal assistance. It's not a surprise if you're here on this call today. That's probably why you're here, is because your community or your groups are seeing the need for affordable housing all across the country. And I see a note in the chat. Can we share the navigator email address? I think we'll be able to drop that in the chat as we're here together today. And I do believe that there's a lot of different resources at Email Navigator, also a form that you can fill out at energycommunities.gov. And 55% of the respondents said affordable housing. And what we want to highlight today are some innovative solutions so that we can share best practices, share some of these solutions, but also build some coalitions both across the government and across energy communities. And so one example is in Eastern Kentucky, Gurney's Bend. There's a partnership between the Housing Development Alliance and the city of Hazard in Kentucky, brings 15 single-family affordable homes to a city that had not seen a new development in 50 years. I mean, in Hazard County, or Hazard, Kentucky, there's a 30% poverty rate, a median income that's approximately half the national average. And affordable housing is really key to what is necessary. And there and many energy communities around the country. And the Gurney's Brim project was made possible by a combination of federal and private sector funding, thanks to programs like Berea College Appalachia Fund, the Hope Building Project. The citizens are able to achieve funded internships and opportunities that help teach the necessary skills and provide job training aid to help build and maintain affordable housing in the neighborhood. Really thinking about it being a sustainable program that builds that capacity in communities and really lifts communities up in a more holistic way. Affordable housing is absolutely a key to economic growth and stability in rural communities. And what we've done is we've launched rapid response teams around the country, rapid response teams that are geographically focused, building the networks in communities with both at the state level, the county level, the community level, developers, that brings the resources of all 11 federal agencies in the IWG to a very local level. We have one in Eastern Kentucky, like I mentioned, in the Illinois coal basin that includes Western Kentucky and Southern Indiana, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Appalachian, Ohio, the Four Corners region in the West, Wyoming, and more to come in terms of our rapid response teams. This is another tool to make sure we're bringing that to the table. And in our rapid response team work, say, for example, in Wyoming, the HUD team, the Housing and Urban Development team, have been integral in those conversations as well. And so in the coming months, we're going to be engaging with state and local stakeholders in Montana and Virginia to launch a rapid response team in those two states. And there's a lot of work that we've done in the last 4 years. We just released a report, and we've been able to drive $54 billion of federal investment and $315 billion of private sector investment into energy communities. But we've really just started. And so we're going to continue to do this work, listen to community stakeholders, and understand what your needs are, and try to deliver better responses from the federal government. With that, I'm really excited to be with you today in this trying to address affordable housing. And I'd like to pass it to Molly McCabe, the CEO and founder of Hayden Tanner, a strategic real estate advisory firm, who has graciously offered to moderate our conversation with our other speakers. Molly, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your comments around what you're doing in this really important piece. Happy to hear that you've got Montana on your list for another hub. So that's great. As noted, I am the CEO of a real estate development and investment advisory firm based in Montana, and we build mixed-use communities with an eye towards sustainability. My background is fairly wide-ranging. I have a deep background in finance and other things. One of the things that we also focus on is a challenging issue that we're finding, and I'm sure that many of you also find in your communities, which is increasing homelessness. So housing is a critical need across the board. What we're finding, again, across all of the country, and in particularly in many of our rural and energy communities, is that housing needs it's not just an urban issue. Approximately 40% of households, more than 500,000 within energy communities, are paying more than 30% of their household income on rent. In Montana, that number is actually 45%. And according to Urban Land Institute's 2024 Home Attainability Index, the data confirms that housing production impacts affordability and for sale and rental affordability, and that all moves in tandem across all the markets. Meaning, if there are challenges in the rental markets, there are also challenges in purchasing housing that people can actually afford. This is particularly more challenging these days, despite yesterday's reduction on interest rates. Higher construction costs, they're still rising, and interest rates are still challenged. There simply is not enough housing to meet the demand. Today, we're going to hear from several project examples. It's very exciting to see what's happening in a variety of communities that you might not ordinarily hear on sort of the national front. Often you hear about big cities on the coast. So I'm really excited to talk about this. But what we know is that no matter what your housing goals are in your communities or the reason for starting any additional housing is developing robust public and private partnerships are critical to success. And I think you're going to find that it may take a little bit longer than you might originally hope, but I think you need to just keep focusing and pushing forward. So today, my role as the moderator is simply to introduce the speakers, keep the conversation moving, keep us on time, and facilitate a question and answer period at the end. So if we could move to the perfect. If you could drop your questions in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat, it's just easier for us to follow that. We will try and get to as many questions as possible at the end. If you have any technical glitches, reach out in the chat to Energy Communities and they can help you with any technical glitches. And when we get to each of the panelists, I would ask you to please turn on your camera when I introduce you, and then you can begin your presentation. So with that, let's get started. First up, we have on the Honorable Tammy Tincher, who is a Greenbrier County Community Commissioner who lives in Raynell, West Virginia. Tammy also represents West Virginia as the Northeast Region Representative to the Executive Committee for the National Association of Counties. We also have Matt Ford, who is a seventh generation of Greenbrier County in West Virginia. Mr. Ford is a trusted environmental consultant with 2 decades of experience and an active leader in various organizations. His primary role is as president of the Greenbrier Environmental Group and, as you'll hear them talk about it, the Meadow River Valley Association. So with that, let me hand it off to you, Tammy and Matt.
Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate the opportunity, invitation to be here today to present about the Meadow River Valley and to have Matt join us. Being a part of the National Association of Counties, I've had the opportunity to be involved in the Building Resilient Economies and Coal Communities cohort through the program. We have been able to discuss issues related to housing limitations in energy communities. And so this is a great opportunity to be able to just give some information about what we have done in the Meadow River Valley. And I have been a commissioner in Greenbrier County for 6 years and live in the Meadow River Valley. And so that area of the county is where I represent and where my home is. And Molly mentioned areas that may not regularly be on the news, but our beginning spiel, anytime we kind of talk about the Meadow River Valley Association and our area, is in 2016, June 26, 2016, we had a flood, and we had a 1,000-year flood, and we lost 15 people in our county. And my community, Raynell, and other parts of the county were devastated by the floodwaters. And from that disaster, a lot of things came from it, but one of the things that came from it was the Meadow River Valley Association, which started out as just a way to be able to get information out to the community in the early stages of the following the disaster. And then it quickly became a aspect of how can we redevelop our community. And so I'm going to pass it on to Matt. We'll give a little bit of background about our county. We're 32,000 people approximately. The county is about 120 square miles, and very different areas of the county, landscape, watershed wise. Our side of in the Meadow River Valley, we have coal mines, and we have had a decline in the coal industry in our county. But we have a very mountainous area, increased poverty. Unfortunately, we have had to deal with the opioid epidemic and the all of the issues that have been related to that and how to move forward from that. And of course, housing is one of those issues. So Matt is as president of the Meadow River Valley Association, but he has been a stalwart in really trying to push the community development through. And I'm going to pass it to him to let him tell our story.
Thanks, Tammy. Well, good afternoon. Again, she mentioned I'm Matt Ford. I've been working on community and economic development since around 2008. And so we'll talk today about one of our projects. Next slide, please. As Tammy mentioned, it all started for us getting people to work together in 2016 when we had 11 inches of rainfall in less than 24 hours. These are a couple iconic pictures from that flood. One is a house floating down Howard's Creek in White Sulphur Springs on fire, and another local library with all the books stacked outside. But people work together when they have to work together, we found, and we had people from all over the country come to help, and people who were local work together like we had never seen before to help get housing in order after the flood. Our housing stock, for the majority, is well over 50 years old. So a lot of the houses that were flooded were in disrepair before the high waters came into those homes. But we knew that when people work together, we had to keep that collaboration going. Next slide, please. So it started out with community gatherings and planning. First was, where do you go to get bleach and a mop and a shovel and a new couch, or in some cases a new home, thanks to Appalachia Service Project that built several homes in the area. But we had people getting together, and the conversations changed to, okay, so we're getting our basic needs taken care of. What else do we need to work on in our community? And one of the projects was continuing to get people together. We did a Trail Town seminar. We did local foods, local places that was funded by US EPA. But those conversations led to several projects that people were interested in and brought several different resources together. Next slide, please. So one project that continued to come up in the community conversations was the Rupert Elementary School. It was built in the 30s and was the original high school. Our side of the county, the Meadow River Valley, which has one stoplight, by the way, if you're wondering about the size of the area, at one point had 4 high schools. Now it has one, but this campus was one of those 4 high schools that was closed back in the 1960s. It wasn't flooded in 2016, but that mountain you see behind the campus, when 11 inches of rain falls, all that water flowed through the campus. And because of that, the local school board was able to get money to construct a new school in a different location. As with many school projects, when a new school is built, they don't get funding to do anything with the old one. And we knew that we did not want another empty school campus in our community. We have a number of those throughout Greenbrier County here in West Virginia, and they're not good things. They house drug addiction and other issues, end up taking those school campuses over. So we immediately started working on the Rupert School campus and brought together all those partners, and it was great to see ideas come together. We developed the campus into the Meadow River Valley Early Childhood Learning Center, the Marvel Center. We shortened that too, and they took 3 of the school campus buildings and operate a daycare and early childhood development center. The gymnasium, Commissioner Tincher's husband actually runs for wrestling practice and other athletic endeavors. And then there's a 3-story building that's a little over 21,000 square feet that we partnered with Woodlands Community Development from Elkins, West Virginia, to turn into a mixture of affordable housing and market rate housing. Next slide, please. So that 3-story building is now the Rupert School Apartments. And if you were there at this very moment, you would see contractors feverishly working to get that project done by the end of the year, to keep the tax credit allocations that we have. But we've got 20 apartment units, 6 of which are market rate. The others are affordable. Next slide, please. It started with a various number of small grants to get some of the soft costs taken care of. The picture on the left is from a focus grant we received from the West Virginia Brownfields Assistance Center that paid for some architectural drawings, and then an architect worked with us throughout the process. And then the picture on the right is a photo that I took a couple weeks ago of one of the apartments. The school's got some really nice big windows that everybody loves, and the school classrooms will make for really nice apartments. Next slide. As I mentioned, we have 16 affordable housing, or 20 units, 6 of which are market rate, 16 are 1-bedroom, and there are 4 2-bedroom apartments. Took some work to get all of that to work out within the square footage and the layout of the classrooms, and we're currently working to lease those apartments. And I broke every Zoom and presentation rule with that picture on the right, but that is a schematic of the first floor apartments. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow, Matt, Tammy, super excited to dig deeper into that and see how you did that and learn more about your capital stack and have a few questions on that. So thank you so very much. Next up, we have Ron Walker, who serves as president of the Cook of CFC Properties. And the Cook Group is a property development and management company specializing in historically and architecturally significant structures. He also serves as president of Workforce Housing, LLC, which is a recently developed Cook Group company, which was created to address the lack of workforce housing for Cook medical employees in communities across South Central Indiana. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Ron. So with that, go right ahead.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, everyone, for joining this. I'm going to learn a lot from this, and I hope I can, share with you some of what we're doing. It's a bit unique, and I want to say I really appreciate how Dr. Anderson framed this discussion. And so I'll jump in and go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit first about who we are. We are primarily a medical device company. Started really with heart stents, founded and headquartered in Bloomington, Indiana. And but we're a little bit more than that. The founders of the company had a love for historic preservation. And over the last several decades, they would buy and repurpose historic buildings, primarily in downtown Bloomington, Indiana, but also in Canton, Illinois, where we have manufacturing facilities. And then also in a town called West Baden and French Lick, Indiana. People know French Lick if they know who Larry Bird was. I find out fewer and fewer people know that as audiences get younger. But so we're more than a medical device company. We operate 2 full-service resorts that employ over 1,000 people. We have the real estate company, which I run, where we manage commercial and residential real estate. We have other companies there, but within the family, if you will. But what we realized in our medical device business, which is primarily, here in rural southern Indiana, I'm in Bloomington. It's home of Indiana University. It's a college metro area. But Orange County, where the resorts are, and in another county near here, they are rural counties. And we began seeing that, and you can go to the next slide. We began seeing that our employees were coming to us, really complaining about the lack of housing. And in manufacturing in the rural Midwest, you pull employees from a wide kind of workforce web. And so they're commuting long distances. And as we realized, hey, we are in a tight employment economy, and people are driving more, and they have more opportunities available to not drive somewhere. We began to realize we should tackle this housing problem that our employees are really helping us to see. And of course, you hear about it all around the country. So the problem, I think, wouldn't be new to any of you, but I'll just put that there. The main one that we wanted to address, the two main ones, were there's not enough single family housing. I think there's clearly just not enough houses that people can afford to buy. And I think Dr. Anderson talked about a community that hadn't had a new housing subdivision in decades. In Orange County, we learned that there hadn't been a new housing subdivision since the 1960s. And so what we did is we looked at our history in real estate development, and we decided we're going to sell off some of the properties that we manage, and we are going to fund a program that builds houses. Next slide, please. And the reason we did that are some of the things I just told you about. There is an employment variable to this, that employee recruitment is tough. It's a low unemployment rate. We're hearing from our employees. However, we're also in communities where, if we are seeing those communities decline in a population or not having any reinvestment, we believe that hurts us as well as employers there. Then you begin to not have the tax base for services, and the schools suffer and have declining population. Those sorts of things. But we also saw that local government and the communities, they needed our help to do it. And we can't just talk about the problem and not step forward and say, with a proposed solution. And so we thought, we have some history here. We have the resources to do this. Let's step forward. Next slide, please. And so what we decided to do was build houses. And we all know there are programs out there, maybe that help with down payment assistance, or companies can help with relocation. It doesn't necessarily help the inventory of homes. And so what you see in a picture here are two of our first models that we built. They're the same home, but they're in Orange County, Indiana, a southern Indiana county. We started there, and then we also moved up to Spencer, Indiana, which is 30 minutes west of Bloomington. It's a county of about 12,000 people. And we thought, well, we're just going to build homes, and we're going to build them. We're going to keep the cost as low as we can. We are going to offer them first to our employees within Cook at the price it cost us to build the homes. So we're taking money from other real estate investments we have. In a sense, we're putting them in a fund, and we're going to build homes. We're going to sell them, try to recover our costs, and we're just going to turn and keep investing in them and keep building. And if Cook employees don't buy them, then we'll expand that out a little wider, because we want homes to be built in these communities. And if somebody else moves into it, it might free up another unit for someone else to move into, and we're helping the community there. Our focus is purely on single family homes and owner occupancy. And the chairman of our board, Steve Ferguson, who I really credit with this vision, believes, and rightfully so, I think, that home ownership is what will help build community. And too many of the people in our rural communities and in our workforce don't have they have really a reduced ability to purchase a home, and therefore to kind of grab that piece of the American dream where you're growing wealth in your home. And so we really set out to do that. You can see a little bit about some of the variables. Perfect. These are in many ways starter homes, right? They're very good starter homes. They're stick-built homes, but they're pretty basic. And what we put in them is really somewhat a feedback from the employees that we heard from. So this model you're seeing in front of you is fairly typical of what we're building, but we're putting this house on a 3rd-acre lot. So because people talked about they wanted enough space. Now, to some, that's not a lot, but to many others in an urban community or a small town, that's a decent size, 100 feet wide by 150 feet deep. There's a fair amount grass to mow, if that's what it is. But what we agreed to do was build either 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom homes, 2-bath homes, okay? All appliances are included. We are running underground electricity and fiber to every house. And we're using, we can go to the next slide. We're using LVT flooring, stainless steel appliances, those types of things. And what we wanted was for people to be able to move into a home on that day, have everything they needed. So their washer and dryer is brand new and it's there. All this is here as well. And we wanted that really to be a turnkey process for them. And so far, it's off to a pretty good start. It's been a huge learning curve for us, and costs are challenging for us. Our costs are really, what we're mostly concerned about is what is that monthly payment for the buyer. And when we started this program a few years ago, interest rates were 3.8%, and you know where they are now. If you're a buyer who's barely into the range of being able to buy a house, that difference in interest rate is a few $100s a month, and so it's critical for us. So the home building is, of course, the main visible piece of what we're doing, but we had to do more than that. You can't just build homes and expect that people are going to show up necessarily. So we went to our economic development leaders in the communities and we said, here's what we're looking to do. We can't do it alone. We need your help. We need you to step up. And they did in really great ways, and we're forever grateful to them. I'll give you some examples of that. They pulled leaders together within 48 hours. We had purchased land, had it rezoned, had our plat approved, had to amend it, had it approved again, started construction on our first set of homes, all within a 12-month period. And the town of Spencer agreed to extend wastewater treatment line and a lift station to our development. That value of what they did served as a match, which we were then able to apply for what's called READY funds. They are originated as ARPA dollars to the state of Indiana, and we use those funds to reimburse the cost for installing public infrastructure. So all the main lines, wastewater, water, streets as well in our neighborhood. So we had a partnership there. Then we would do cafeteria days in our manufacturing facilities, and we would do sessions on credit reports and kind of financial health. And that got a lot of employees talking, and it got them working on their credit scores and discovering things that might have been a hindrance to them being approved for a loan. And for the engineers in the company, they were very detailed about their plans, and they kind of knew what they needed to do. But the whole point is that we provided education and resources to employees, and that helped them realize, hey, this might be something that could be real for me in the future. And so far that's worked really well. You can go to the next slide if you like. And before I talk about covenants, I just want to say that we did not want to be an employer who was building a house and then deciding which employee was able to buy that house. So partnering with the economic development folks allowed us to say, hey, we're going to create an application. That application is going to go to you. And then you can do a random drawing of all the first applications you get, and you draw the name. And when we built, for instance, our first 14 homes, we did an application period. You would send in an application. If your name was drawn first, you get your pick of the first 14 homes. Second person gets their pick of the remaining 13, so on and so forth. We did the first phase that way, and after that, we were able really to do it on a first come, first served basis. But the Chamber and Economic Development Group are still the group that facilitates that process, and they're the ones that put the houses on their website and promote them for us. If we don't have Cook employees that want to buy a house, we open it up to the local school corp employees. Then we open it up to just Chamber members. Said all of you can apply for the home. And it's gone really, really well. I can tell you we have built 27. We have sold 26. And so lastly, what I want to tell you is we have some unique covenants. This is an owner occupancy development only. You cannot use them as investment properties. And we wanted to stop people from trying to flip them for investment purposes. So you see why we did these first three, they're the other two bullet points. We want to control that a little bit because we're really trying to help people establish owner occupancy and grow their wealth that way. And so we're very pleased with it. It's been a challenge, but we have our next closing on Monday, so we keep moving forward with it. And I'll be available later to answer any questions if you have. So Molly, thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. Ron, you already answered a couple of my questions on some of the fair housing stuff, as well as that whole piece around equity and who benefits and so forth. So that's fantastic. Look forward to whatever questions come from the future. So next we have Rusty Bell, who is Director of Diversification at the Office of Economic Transformation in Gillette at Gillette Community College. And previously to that, he served as Campbell County Wyoming County Commissioner. And Matthew Dalby, who is the Senior Advisor for Economic Development in the Policy Office at the U.S. at EPA. During Matthew's more than 20 years at EPA, he led the Office of Sustainable Communities. And he also served as the initial Deputy Director of the White House Council on Strong Cities, Strong Communities. In 2024, he was the visiting researcher at Resources for the Future. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation and one of the links here around economic development. So look forward to hearing the two of you talk about that. Handing it over.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Molly. I appreciate it. So I'm going to talk to you about when I first started this job, going straight from being a county commissioner in northeastern Wyoming to being the director of economic transformation. It was interesting. So Campbell County, if you don't know, we have lost about 230 million tons of coal production in the last 14 years, which is more than pretty much all the rest of the country provides. And so we've lost more coal production than the whole rest of the country actually mines. Campbell County still has 12 open pit coal mines operating, shipping to 25 other states, 5 coal-fired power plants with the first decommissioning in the late 2030s. But we also have oil and gas production that really increased over a 10-year stretch. At the time when I became this director of this office, we had about 1,200 jobs available and practically no housing on any of the inventories. All price ranges of housing was nothing. We had less than 50 houses on the market, almost zero vacancy in the apartments. And so we had an issue of trying to proactively diversify an economy that we can see a long-range thermal coal forecast for with no housing. And so the first thing I did was I had been involved with the IWG and rapid response teams and talked about that. And so really tried to activate that. 6 months after I started, we actually had a housing summit in Gillette, and we got all the stakeholders to the table, help from Paul and Matthew and Carolyn and the rest of the rapid response team statewide and region wide. We got everybody to the table, and we really wanted to find out what the barriers were. And this was certainly not in my wheelhouse. I didn't think housing was going to be part of economic development. What I have found out since and at that time is that you cannot have economic development and economic diversification if you have no housing available. And that's something that I think we're learning nationwide that is a barrier. And so we got everybody to the table, and I think one of the real important things that came out of that was that we have to, as a state and as communities, we have to welcome a little bit of change. Interestingly enough, the Harvard Growth Lab had been doing some studies in Wyoming on housing, and one of the things that the quotes that we'll never forget is one thing Wyomingites hate more than urban sprawl is density. And so some of the policies that we have in place or had in place at the city and the county level were things like not allowing ADUs or minimum lot sizes that were very large that don't allow a lot of density, and multifamily zoning that could be changed, and then having some access to some revolving infrastructure loans that could help with infrastructure. And so those were some of the things that we identified. We also, and I think I'm going to give him a lot of credit for this, but Matt, when he was in the room that day, said, let's try to figure this out like we don't have any federal assistance, because ultimately, if we're going to fix a housing issue, it's going to be faster if we don't. And I don't know if that's that was that period, but certainly we are in this, and we're going to be the ones to get ourselves out of it. So it was nice to have everybody in the room. So some of the things that came out of that, some of the successes, the city of Gillette bumped up a housing study. The infill lots that we identified, and we had maps all around the room. We actually took bus tours of areas that were ready to build. Infill lots actually have been built on since that. I think there's been about almost 36 infill lots that have been built on. There's been a multifamily 228 unit multifamily unit plans approved by the city just last month. And then Gillette has a large plan, like a comp plan comp land use plan that they're actually going to finalize this April. They've been working on it now for 6 months. So that's exciting to see all of those things happening really in about 18 months. And so, I think that was to commend the rapid response team, but actually everybody else in the community that came to the table. We're all there, all talking about how do we fix this problem community wide. And Matthew was there, and so I'm going to turn it over to him to fill in the gaps that I missed, which is probably quite a few.
Rusty, I don't know if there are any gaps, and I appreciate the you're thinking that I'm going to fill something in here, but the things that I just want to add is just beginning to look to the future, right? And it's kind of it's kind of interesting to be here because I think Commissioner Tincher, we know each other from the Rennell work back in 2016 that my office did with you all, from local food, local places, and some of the long-term recovery. I guess we started out with you all, but so I think there's a couple things what's going on in Gillette, right, which is where there is potential for some new investment. Like the housing challenges and maybe some of the solutions are different than in places that might not be growing as much. But the bottom line is, whether we're in Gillette and Campbell County or in Rennell or any other parts of Appalachia or the Four Corners, housing supply is an issue, right? And it's not, you don't need me to say that or anybody else on this call to say that. I know that there was one comment about some places do have a lot of housing. I think what we're trying to talk through right now is ensuring that there's housing where investments are going into the future economy, right? So location matters, right? The second thing is, making sure that there's housing being built for people at different times of their lives. I mean, I think one of the reasons that, I said pretty much what Rusty did say about there may not be a federal solution to some of the housing challenges in Campbell County is that, much of the housing programs that might have been useful or usable in Campbell County are single family programs. And, there's a lot of us at different times of our lives where we haven't lived in single family houses. We've lived in apartments or condos or basement or ADUs, right? And we have a housing supply issue across all different types of housing. And so maybe just to wrap this up, to think about the future, I kind of feel like what we did in Campbell County was kind of useful. Why don't we bring together investors in the economy, builders, contractors, land developers, finance people working in sort of affordable housing, philanthropy, the local land use folks, the local elected officials. Why don't we bring them all together and say, what are the things that each of us provide to increasing the of housing, and then find out why we're not able to do it. Like, what are the barriers that the finance side people see? What are the barriers that the local land use folks see, et cetera, right? And if we just come up with, let's say, what the top 10 are, and then like work on knocking those barriers down, we might be able to come up with some solutions in energy communities. I was hoping like that it'd be useful to say this out loud, is because like we in the federal government have the ability to do some convening. We don't always have the ability to like do all the analysis of these barriers, and we certainly don't know what the barriers are, how to overcome them. But it would be great if we could just get folks together like we did in Campbell County and just have the conversation around this geography, this energy communities geography, find out what the problems are, what the type of housing that is needed, who wants to invest there, whether it's in housing or economic development, that sort of thing. And then the last thing I just want to mention, and I'm putting that out there because that would be a great project for all of us to work on in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, etc. Knock down the barriers to increasing housing supply. I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward thing to do. Second thing is like when you start to talk to people, you know, we start to realize that like sometimes there are challenges that may not be the challenges that we think they are, right? Because Rusty, I think if you remember one of the first times when we were on the calls back in fall of 2021, we're coming out of the pandemic, and there were some folks in Wyoming who were saying, we wish our downtowns worked a little bit better because we would have gotten people to move here during the pandemic, right? And then you hear, oh, the only thing that the folks that people really don't like in Wyoming is density. Well, you can't have like a good downtown and only be building single family homes on the outside of town, right? You can't try to attract people into your downtown if there's no housing in downtown. So, you know, a lot of these sort of challenges, if we can just talk about them, they might actually be solvable. And I think I'm just gonna end right there. Okay.
Oh, outstanding. You raise a lot of really interesting points, and being from Montana, I totally get the density conversation. We don't really like density. And I want to just put a pin in the question around private capital and bringing private capital in. So let's come back to that. And it's a great segue to Anna Moon, who's our next speaker, who's going to talk about how do we unlock capital for housing development. Anna Moon is the head of business development for the Colorado Clean Energy Fund. She engages with key stakeholders and potential partners to pursue new projects. She has over 20 years of experience and has worked with various clean energy companies to help commercialize innovative solutions through collaborative agreements. And I've seen Anna present before, and she's outstanding. So looking forward to hearing what she has to say today. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Molly. I'm happy to be here today to share more about the low-cost financing available for clean energy projects through our organization. We are now expanding outside of Colorado with the new program that I'm going to go into detail about. And so with that, we've actually rebranded to Collective Clean Energy Fund to be more inclusive and indicate that we are going to be working throughout the U.S. And so with that, I'll provide an intro to who we are. The Collective Clean Energy Fund, or CCEF for short, is a mission-first nonprofit green bank. And we provide loans for clean energy projects. To just name a few examples, that includes energy efficiency measures for residential and commercial buildings, distributed generation, such as solar, and also EV infrastructure. We understand that margins for affordable housing can be quite tight, and when there are budget cuts, clean energy measures can be the first ones to go, despite the measures resulting in lower utility costs for the tenants. And so by providing lower cost debt, we make these clean energy measures affordable for developers and property owners, and thereby really benefiting the folks who will be living in these units. CCEF team has expertise in both clean energy technologies and financial services, which means we can provide insights into the cost benefits of various clean energy measures, while also helping to figure out the best loan structure for a specific project. In addition, compared to a traditional bank, we can be more flexible with how we use our capital. And this enables us to offer below market interest rates and longer term loans, which in turn can help with the monthly cash flow for our project. CCEF's purpose and mission are centered around helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Thus far, we've focused on clean energy projects that historically have had a harder time getting loans from banks. We have also worked to reach communities that have less access to financing, including rural areas and low-income regions. With that being said, we'll be working throughout the country to meet differing needs of project donors across various sectors and communities. Next slide, please. Since our inception, CSUF has financed over 3,000 projects, with more than half of the funds going to low-income and disadvantaged communities. CSUF was initially capitalized by a grant from the state of Colorado back in 2021. And since then, we've significantly grown our investment capacity, and we're continuing to grow. Next slide. The recent big news is that CSUF is a sub-awardee for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And with that, as mentioned before, we'll be expanding both our product offerings and our geographic focus. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, for folks who are not familiar with it, it's a $27 billion program through the EPA, and it has three parts: the National Clean Investment Fund, Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and Solar for All. CSUF is a sub-awardee under the Coalition for Green Capital for the NCIF program. And each of these programs have different focus and different objectives. And for us, we'll be focusing on deploying these funds as low-cost debt to help more projects move forward. And so as you can imagine, this is a very exciting time for us. With this $27 billion of funding just beginning to get deployed, we expect to see this program have significant impact in the communities throughout the U.S. in 2025. Next slide. In terms of accessing these funds, we will be responsible for deploying roughly $150 million, and we have allocated half of that for EPA Region 8 states, which are listed here, and that also includes the tribal nations in the region as well. The other half of the funds can be deployed anywhere in the U.S. We're working now to get the word out about GGRF, so I really appreciate your attendance today so that more project donors can be informed about this new source of capital and take advantage of it. The three focus areas for this program are distributed generation and storage, building decarbonization, such as heat pumps and improved building envelope, and zero emissions transportation, including EV infrastructure. There's also a catch-all bucket for any projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which gives us additional flexibility in regards to the projects that we can support. In terms of current status, we're getting ready to launch this program in January, with projects already going through due diligence now. In parallel, we've been getting more details about the requirements for this program, both from the EPA and the Coalition for Green Capital. So the exact terms are still TBD, but we are aiming to set the maximum term to enable us to provide longer-term debt, and we're targeting the rates to be very competitive and below market rates. Again, we haven't finalized the details yet, but depending on the project specifics, we are working to offer various types of debt, including pre-dev, construction, bridge, and also perm debt. And in an effort to deploy all of this capital in a relatively short amount of time, the minimum loan amount for this program will be $1 million in financing from us. And this is a bit of a shift for us compared to our other programs, as we now look to support larger projects. And for the past several months, we've been soliciting submissions from project donors to do the initial qualification of projects. So if you have projects that are shovel ready and anticipate closing on financing within the next 12 months, please reach out. That way we can work with you to get the projects on our loan team's radar and teed up for financing. So given that this is federal funding, there are some additional federal requirements. Next slide, please. And the first one is Build America, Buy America. And this requirement will apply for any projects that are deemed public infrastructure serving a public function. And so some examples of public infrastructure are listed here. Other things include gas stations, hotels, places of entertainment like theaters and stadiums. And then some examples of non-public infrastructure are privately owned multifamily housing, privately owned EV charging stations without public access. And so for these private projects, BABA would not be required. There is a waiver process for BABA, So if you need that for your project, please indicate it and we can work with you on that. The next requirement is Davis-Bacon and related acts. This is in regards to prevailing wages and applies to projects that are funded under this program from us during the construction phase of the project. For this, weekly certified payroll records demonstrating wage compliance would be needed. And looking at these two requirements, there are a lot of ins and outs and details associated with them based on the type of debt you need, the type of projects. So if you have any questions, we're happy to go through your project in detail and just sort through which requirements would apply and help guide you through that. Next slide, please. Given that CSEF is a mission-driven nonprofit, we are aiming to deploy 50% of the funds to projects in low-income and disadvantaged communities. We will be looking to support other projects more broadly as well, and this is a portfolio level target, so not something that will be required on a project-by-project basis. All right, next slide, please. I wanted to walk through a few examples of project types just to shed more light on what CSEF has funded in the past and is looking to continue supporting into the future. The first one here is multifamily affordable and workforce housing, of course, given the topic of this webinar. We have worked significantly in this sector, and given the complex capital structure associated with affordable housing development, we have partnered with Impact Development Fund, which is a CDFI with extensive experience in this space. With CSEF working together with IDF, developers can get a more complete solution for financing their broader project and not just the clean energy elements. And so we can help build out the broader capital stack. And for these projects historically, we have provided funding at various stages, including pre-dev, construction, and also perm. And so if folks here who are developers or property owners looking to pursue clean energy elements into your projects, we would love to speak with you. Next slide, please. And then just more broadly, as you build out a community, not just the housing, but also commercial buildings, I did want to mention that for new construction, we have done clean energy measure financing for those projects as well. And so obviously here, we would just be a part of a capital stack. And so what we would typically do is review the clean energy elements of the project. And we would, it would be helpful if the developer has engaged an engineering firm to do an energy assessment. That way we can quantify the impact of those measures. Next slide. The other one for us that's pretty big sector are the retrofits. And so for any different type of buildings, whether it's, again, residential, commercial, or even industrial, folks that are doing the retrofits to improve the energy efficiency, we can work to help finance those projects as well. Next slide. And then I do want to just briefly highlight a few other sectors that we provide financing for. So one of them is CNI, or community scale solar and storage. If there's a community that's pursuing these efforts, we can certainly come in and provide really competitive financing. So those projects can move forward and provide lower utility costs more broadly into a community. Next slide. And the last is just other types of projects. We've been talking to municipalities and other tax-exempt entities about microgrids as different communities try to increase their resilience, especially with the things that are happening in the environment these days. And so happy to chat about those. And then also if there are manufacturing facilities or industrial operations happening in your communities that are pursuing geothermal, we can help support those projects as well. In terms of process, the one after this will have my contact info. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, if you have a project that's ready to go, you can go to our website, and there you'll find a button that's for submitting a project. And that's not a loan application. It's just to provide high-level initial information about your project so that our loan team can get in touch with you and set up some time to go through the specifics of your need and see what products that we offer that could be a good fit for you. All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, handing it back over to Molly.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. And I'd love it if the panelists would each turn on your cameras. And if attendees have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can in the next 10 or 15 minutes. And so let me sort of start from the top, and I think some of those are probably going to go straight to at least on the beginning to Tammy and Matt, because they were at the top of the order. So there were a couple of very specific questions for you, Tammy and Matt, around the apartments. You know, what's the market difference between the market rate units, the rent market rate units, and the affordable? Can you talk a little bit about the gap there?
Sure. And apologize. Matt had to step off the call, so hopefully I can get as much information in. Can you hear me okay?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Can you hear me any better now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize for that. So Matt had to step off the call, and I will try my best to try to answer some of the specific questions. But the thought behind the developer and the management company that will be taking care of the property once it's filled, and even getting the properties, or getting the apartments filled, will have determined the market, have determined the rate. You know, our in Greenbrier County, we are, and as I mentioned earlier, we're in an impoverished area, low median income area. And so our low income housing is obviously supplemented with HUD and other benefits that individuals may have. But I do not know the exacts. The concept was the first floor will be where the market rate housing is. It is going to have more storage area, easier accessibility. Of course, there is an elevator, and we have, you know, the access to the first and second floors, but just the size and space is going to be more on the first floor with the market rate housing. The thought is, our hope is that we will be able to focus on the remote workers that we have in our area. West Virginia was blessed with or has been blessed with a remote work program through West Virginia University, and Brad and Elise Smith. Brad Smith was from West Virginia, and they founded the Ascend remote work program. So we are very limited in housing because of just our hope is that we'll be able to focus on that remote work community to be able to provide housing for them. And then our low income, single family, you know, senior community for for that aspect too.
Great.
Apologize, I don't have the specific numbers.
No worries. I'm sure we can look at those. later. I'm sort of curious. One of the things that's come up in the chat, and I think it's or in the Q&A, and I think I'm going to expand it myself a little bit more broadly. Maybe looking sort of maybe at least initially at Ron and Rusty and Matthew on this one is this question around, as you partner with general contractors, local subs, investors, investor capital, you know, are they taking subsidized rates? How are you, and I know in my community, bringing in investment capital, this is not a gateway market. And so bringing in outside capital has been more challenging than I've experienced it in other communities that are more, primary or secondary markets. So maybe if you can talk about both the sort of the GC sub partners, that side, as well as the capital, private side capital, and how that comes together in some of these things you're looking at.
Want me to start?
Sure.
Our situation might be a little bit unique. As I mentioned before, we sold off some real estate assets, so we essentially capitalized a fund of our own. And then we began looking to contractors to build for us. But this was at a time when builders were very, very busy, typically building higher end homes. And so we didn't get a lot of interest immediately because they knew what our price point was, and they simply had better options, in my opinion. When the economy changed, we noticed that there was a greater interest in our project because as a builder, they might have seen their pipeline, think their future got a little less certain in terms of how many homes they would build next year, and we were able to say, hey, we can do 15 with you. We will be the developer. We'll pull the permits. We'll take the builder's liability. You build the house for us, and we will pay you for it. And there was a volume communication we had, and so we really worked with them closely on every detail of the home construction process. So they would still earn a fair wage and a fair profit on this, but really they had steady work and a lot less risk and liability. So somewhat that's unique to our situation. It's also unique to the timing of the housing market in the last few years.
Molly, I'm not sure I can answer it better than that, but one of the things that we're having an issue with here that Matt or I never talked about is, Gillette is really set between the Black Hills and more of a Black Hills area and the mountains to the west. And so we're while we have a lot of jobs and high paying jobs, you can build a house here and not get as much for it as you can get in those two areas for the exact same house. So attracting a builder to build, multiple houses in our area is tougher because they can go 60 miles one way or the other and get more for that exact same house. So that has been a challenge for us. And I know that just kind of goes along with what you asked, but it's, it's not answering your question.
Well, it's the same issue we see here because the cost of construction is basically the same. Everybody thinks that labor is cheaper in our communities, but I have found that that's generally speaking not necessarily the case. And I see Matthew, you have yours unmuted, so maybe you can comment on that. And then Anna, I know you're really plugging a hole right there in some ways. So maybe Matthew first, and then Anna.
Yeah, I'll be quick. And I'll just say that I think the way that we have been sort of understanding the way housing gets built might need to change, right? So, for instance, right, if investors who want to invest in the places where you can get tax credits for making investments in clean energy manufacturing, or even if you go back to like opportunity zones from the 2017 tax bill, investors who want to invest in places where they're going to need labor are going to need housing, right? Right, because they're going to need people to work there, and so there are perhaps potentially other ways to think about this. And I'll just sort of drop in the quick example from Gillette, where the Western Welding School, right, has way more demand for slots to get trained to be a welder. And, I think, be, before I met Rusty, right, the Western Welding School was going around and buying up leases on apartments, right, so that they could house students who would come in. And I think they have started now to enter into agreements with developers to build housing so that they have housing for their future students. Oh, and that frees up some of the housing for folks who live in Gillette, who were not able to get housing because the Western Welding School had bought up their leases, right? So if we think about, like, if you want to invest and you need labor, then maybe some of the tax credits will free up some of your investment funds that you can put into housing or partner with housing. So we begin to think about this in a little bit of a different way. Maybe we can solve some problems.
Great.
Yeah, and
Janet?
I think for, especially for Colorado, where we've had a presence for a few years, we've developed some significant relationships. So whether it's with the housing authority or the regional government organizations, to work together with them, because a lot of them, especially when you look at the resort towns in Colorado, where there's a shortage of workforce housing, there's a lot of effort there to try to build new housing. And so for us to come in with the lower cost capital, but then also trying to use that capital, incentivize private capital to come in, has been one of the efforts that we've been trying to push forward with. And then, in terms of some of the other new innovative ideas that we've been hearing have been modular homes. So in order to decrease the dependency on having additional workforce and trying to build out these houses quicker with less resources is another thing that we've been kind of trying to support and also pay attention to as that effort grows.
Right. Interesting. A couple of questions here around, maybe Rusty, you might want to answer this one around, what's your best advice for convincing people who don't want density in their communities? Let me know, because I'd like to hear it myself.
Sure, yeah. So we had this happen, and so I have a really good example. Apartment complex. A developer wants to build an apartment complex. The folks that have the residential subdivision next to it don't want it. So they're in at the city council complaining they don't want that rezoned. And so what I did was, actually, I had some support letters from some of our large employers that they couldn't hire because there wasn't housing. I used, I emailed all the city council members. I copied all of those employers so that they knew that they all knew who was on the emails, and said, this is why we need housing. How do we diversify if we don't have housing? How do we fill our vacant positions if we don't have housing? And then the other thing is I went to the city council members, city council meetings, and I brought the police reports from other housing or other apartment complexes, because you hear everything. When you get people in there, you'll hear, we don't want these kind of people next to us and all of that. So I really just said, hey, you don't know what these kind of people are. There's some of the people sitting in this room, and so you have to go out there and you have to battle. But we pulled police logs and police reports from some of those folks that were the NIMBYs from their area, and compared it to the apartment complexes that were already built, and they were really similar, and there wasn't a lot of differences. And so, I think you just kind of have to break down those myths about what and who lives in an apartment complex, and the fact that somebody might not want to live in an apartment forever, but they have to live somewhere. And some of our employees have to live somewhere, and they're in different stages of their lives. And so you really just have to you just have to kind of battle that. And that's how we did it. And it did pass, and they are going to break ground in the spring. And so, I mean, it's a challenge and it's work, but that's the way I did it.
Tammy, anything from your perspective? I mean, you're also doing, multifamily in certainly in a school, but, interesting to see has that changed did you have a problem with NIMBYism? And maybe, I guess my next question is, were there any lessons learned from that now that you're renting out the units on the construction side, or all of the process leading up to it that, you want to share?
Well, I think one of the biggest things with any project, and I'm sure everyone, all of the speakers and even everybody on the call have experienced this, is that, you don't really get a lot of buy-in until they either start seeing dirt move or the project is completed or almost completed. You always have that. I wouldn't say lack of support, but just that you don't have the optimism in the onset. And so I think that for us has been one of the biggest issues, is just having that buy-in that this is a project that can work. Because our goal, as really from starting out doing this, was one, to make sure we didn't have another abandoned building in our community, which we have a significant amount of, and then also to try to bring our communities together after disaster. And this facility is really central to the Meadow River Valley, and so by working through the process, and again, the flood happened in 2016, and we're just now to the point of where we're renting those, or getting ready to rent those apartments. That that's a long time to keep people positive about a project. And so for us, I think that's the biggest thing, is because of our ruralness, and knowing that it's going to be, that there'll be community people who have lived in the community all their life, as well as, new people possibly. But I think really just the optimism, or trying to get the optimism that to know that the project could come to fruition. And we now have that support where people are saying, this is a great way to do this. And we in West Virginia, we have about 20 other schools that are actually going to be closed this year. And so that's the comments, well, gosh, if they could just do what they've done at Rupert. And so now we're getting that reality of, people are realizing that it can work. So
Proof of
I think
concept.
that's the hardest thing, is just trying to push through as a group, or whoever's working on it. I'm sure even the developer, the funders, of trying to keep that optimism for the length of time these projects take.
Well, proof of concept and perseverance and all of that. We are at sort of time, so I want to do a round robin, I think, and just sort of have each of you give key takeaways on that you want people to remember coming from this. And then I would also, to the IWG group, there's a lot of ideas in the Q&A and in the chat that I think would be great for future conversations, in terms of certain housing, how some of the housing trust funds were used, difference how you structure certain deals, projects. So I would encourage you on the IWG side to capture as much of that as you can for a future webinar. I've learned a ton, but let's do a quick round robin. What are the key takeaways that you want everyone to remember coming from this? Maybe Ron, you want to start?
Thank you, Molly, and everyone for being here. One key takeaway that I'd like to communicate is that your private employers can be very good partners to the public sector community. We need each other, and private sector employers they feel the pinch, right, in terms of workforce. And so I think if you can approach them and see if they could pool funds and resources together with other things that the public sector might be able to bring forth, you may be able to start a small scale program there. And so I think there's great potential for that type of partnership, and we'd love to see more of that. And we're hoping that our model can help lead to more of that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. Anna, you want to take the next one?
Sure. So I think for folks who are pursuing projects, I just want to note that, incorporating clean energy measures can really help lower the monthly costs. It can help improve the quality of life and also health of the community. And so for folks who are interested, I would say please reach out to us sooner rather than later, just so we can kind of help guide it and also make sure that we've got your project on our team's radar so we can provide any additional input. And especially if it's in a Colorado area, then we can help link you to the appropriate government entities so that you can look into ways to stack grants and other rebates and incentives that can also help out with the overall cost of the project.
Great. Tammy, anything beyond the perseverance and focus on that far image of vision of what you want to create?
I think the key word is collaboration. It's really, I mean, you've got to get all the pieces of the puzzle to come together to make it work. And I thought the comment Matt said about bringing everybody to the table, because that's the hardest thing to do, but that's the thing we need to do, because no matter whether it's an energy community or whatever the case is, I mean, across the country, we know that this issue of housing just keeps coming up, and there's not a clear answer for it. And so having to bring everybody to the table to just have the conversation and to brainstorm is in my mind the only way that it's going to be able to work for us to be able to get closer to a solution to this problem.
Right. And then Rusty and Matthew, in whichever order you'd like to take it.
I'm just gonna kind of echo that. Don't be afraid to ask people to come to the table and get them in a room and have them talk to each other. And in our room, we have 40 people in there, and I made sure that, I didn't put anybody on the spot, but we just went around and made sure everybody got to say what they wanted to say and what the issues were and how they thought they could help. And I really think that especially when everybody knows there's an issue, they really do want to, everybody has the same goal, which is trying to break that barrier and find a way to move forward. And so I think just don't be afraid to do it.
It's really hard to add to anything to what folks have said. And maybe the one thing I will say is that it's every community is different. And I want to make sure that folks on the call know that from a Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities perspective, we're here to be helpful with every community going through this economic transformation. And if the answers that I gave or others gave today are not exactly right for your communities, I think reach out to us, and also have the conversations inside your communities as well, and then look to us and see if we can be helpful in any way. So just want that to come across.
Well, I think that is a perfect way to end this, unless anyone from the Energy Communities teams wants to drop in. Yes, the recording of the webinar will be sent out. And I learned a ton. I will be reaching out to each one of you to get some more details on how I can use this in my own community. Anyone from, from the Energy Communities IWG want to say anything final before we close out this session? Okay, well, thank you all for joining. Thank you, panelists. You were outstanding and amazing. And I am so delighted to see all the projects you've put forth in your communities. And I look forward to seeing future success. And happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.